Hello everybody, today we are going to learn about the effects of beta blocker and nitrate on angina and what is the advantage if we use them combinedly in a same patient. To learn that, firstly we are going to learn how nitrate or glyceryl trinitrate works in our body, what are the effects of them in our physiological system. So glyceryl trinitrate, we all know when glyceryl trinitrate is ingested, it first produce nitric oxide in our body. And nitric oxide, it is a gas and it can easily cross our cell membrane. This nitric oxide cross the cell membrane and it goes to the smooth muscle layer of our vessel. All vessel like the vessel, the smooth muscle that are present in our artery and vein. So nitric oxide or glyceryl trinitrate, these act on our both system, arterial system or venous system. So from glyceryl trinitrate, our nitric oxide is produced and it diffuse and enters into the smooth muscle. So let's see what are the effects in smooth muscle. Let's draw a smooth muscle here. This is our smooth muscle cell and our nitric oxide, it is diffusing into the smooth muscle cell. When this nitric oxide enters into our smooth muscle cell, it mainly acts on an enzyme that is called guanine cyclase. This guanine cyclase and activates this. This guanine cyclase become activated and this activated guanine cyclase acts on GTP and converts the GTP into cyclic GMP. And a cyclic GMP level rises in the cell, and this cyclic GMP activates an enzyme called protein kinase G. This protein kinase G was inactivated, and by this action of cyclic GMP, protein kinase G get activated. Activated protein kinase G. Let's look, as it is a kinase. Kinase enzyme means it deals with phosphate. Either it add phosphate or it dephosphorylate other enzyme. This protein kinase G then it phosphorylate. As it is a kinase, it add phosphates and it deals with the phosphates. This protein kinase G phosphorylate an enzyme called light chain phosphatase. There is a light chain enzyme and this protein kinase G add a phosphate to the light chain and light chain phosphatase. This was inactivated and this protein kinase G add a phosphate to the light chain kinase, light chain phosphatase. This is the added phosphate. And as it is phosphorylated, this light chain phosphatase become activated. Light chain phosphatase, we can see in its name there is a word phosphatase. Phosphatase means this dephosphorylate other enzyme. So this light chain phosphatase, it is a phosphatase enzyme and it works on light chain. Which light chain? Myosin light chain. So we all know myosin. Myosin has heavy chain and light chain, 2 heavy chain and 4 light chain. Let's draw a molecule of myosin here. It is a single heavy chain. This is the heavy chain, and it is another heavy chain. They are twisted each other, and there are 2 heavy chain. And these small proteins, these are 1 light chain, another light chain. It is a 1 light chain and another light chain. So importance of this light chain is this light chain portion of this myosin can interact with the actin. And as we know, actin myosin interacts, the muscle contracts. So we see this light chain phosphatase, it dephosphorylated the myosin light chain. If there was any previously phosphate present, this enzyme will dephosphorylate this phosphate. So if phosphate is added to the light chain, then we can say this myosin is ready to interact with actin myosin and ready for its contraction. But if we dephosphorylated it, if we remove the phosphate that is present in our light chain, then what will happen? This light chain or this myosin can no longer interact with actin and it cannot cause contraction. So dephosphorylation of myosin light chain. And as myosin light chain gets dephosphorylated, the muscle cause relaxation. Clear? Relaxation. And we know if the artery and this smooth muscle are located in the artery and vein. So if nitric oxide acts on the smooth muscle of artery or vein, we can see the muscle is relaxing. That means arteries are dilating, veins are dilating. So in a nutshell, we can say nitric oxide can act on both arteries and vein. When it acts on artery, it causes arteriodilation, and when it acts on vein, it causes venodilation. It is our basic principle, and when we will see the physiology how is altering with this nitric oxide, then we will correlate everything. Now we will see how beta blocker acts on our cardiovascular system. What is the effect on beta blocker? We know that beta blocker are of two types. One is cardioselective beta blocker, and another is both beta blocker. Beta 1 and beta 2, both receptor develop. In here, we are assuming that we talk about cardioselective beta blocker as our topic is in the cardioselective beta blocker means beta 1 blockers. They are named atenolol, metoprolol, propranolol, atenolol and metoprolol. Sorry, propranolol is beta 1 and beta 2 metoprolol. Now we see how this beta blocker acts on our body. To know this, first we have to learn where this beta 1 blocker works, and we should know where this beta 1 adrenergic receptor are present. Beta 1 adrenergic receptor. Beta 1 adrenergic receptor are mainly present in our heart. And in heart, they are almost diffusely present. In heart, they are present in SA node. In heart, they are present in AV node. And in heart, they are also present in our myocardium cell. Myocardium. And another important location of beta 1 blocker is they are present in our kidney. And they cause renin release from our kidney, renin release of our juxtaglomerular cell renin, and this eventually activates the renin angiotensin aldosterone system. So first, now we'll see how this beta blocker normally acts. What is the physiological role, and then next we'll see what will be the effects if we add a beta 1 blocker, and at last we will combine the both effect of bisaltinitrate and beta blocker in an angina patient. So let's see what beta 1 blocker normally does. So first is we will see the effect on heart. In heart, we have said that beta 1 adrenergic receptor are present in all SA node, AV node, and myocardium cell. So let's see how beta 1 blocker normally acts and what is the effect. We all know that beta 1 blocker or adrenergic receptor are 7+ receptor, the serpentine receptor, transmembrane receptor, and they are internally coupled with the protein called G protein. And as it is a beta 1 adrenergic receptor, this is internally coupled with GS protein. And it is a ligand treated channel, and the ligand usually acts on this domain. And in our internal physiological system, this ligand is epinephrine or norepinephrine. We all know norepinephrine is released from adrenergic neurons, and epinephrine is released from medulla of our adrenal or suprarenal gland. And when this epinephrine acts on the beta 1 adrenergic receptors that is located in our heart or renal system, there are some effects in the cell, and now we will discuss them all. We know that a beta 1 adrenergic receptor is internally coupled with G protein. To make it more clear, you know that you see beta 1 GS protein has 3 domains: alpha S, beta S, and gamma S, and alpha S, beta S, and gamma S. And this alpha S is attached with GDP. Normally, GDP, it is a resting state. When epinephrine binds this ligand binding domain of the receptor, this GDP falls off and it acquires GTP. This alpha S domain acquire GTP from GDP. When this acquired GTP, it becomes a high energy bound compound, and when it becomes a high energy compound, this portion falls off, which means these integrated alpha S, beta S, and gamma S, these are not remain integrated as longer, and they divided into 2 parts. G protein part now become 2 parts. Beta S and gamma S both become separated, and alpha S with its energy binding GTP become separated, and this alpha S unit with GTP show their physiological effects. Then this alpha S that has GTP bound acts on an enzyme called adenylyl cyclase and activates the adenylyl cyclase. Activated adenylyl cyclase acts on ATP. ATP acts on ATP and converts the ATP into cyclic AMP. This cyclic AMP activate an enzyme called protein kinase A. As it is a ATP, it is protein kinase A. In previous module, we saw that glyceryl trinitrate, which was increasing the number of cyclic GMP, as it is GMP, the protein was protein kinase G. And now here we are watching that as the molecule here is cyclic AMP, so our protein is protein kinase A. So we can now say that as it is a kinase enzyme, it deals with a phosphate. So, and it adds phosphate to various proteins. So it's a protein, normal protein, and it is a kinase enzyme. It adds phosphate to another protein, and it is called phosphorylation reaction. So this protein become phosphorylated. Phosphorylated protein. So many proteins in our body get phosphorylated with the effects of protein kinase A. And we know that most of the phosphorylated protein in our body that are the active form. So we can say in a nutshell, this protein kinase A activated thousands of protein in our body. So what can be those protein? What are we can give an example, such as it can be a transmembrane channel, such as it can be a sodium channel, potassium channel, calcium channel. These are inactivated, and when we add a phosphate to this channel, this sodium channel or potassium channel, calcium channel, these channels becomes activated. As we know, this our channels are transmembrane protein, and this activated protein will be inserted to our cell membrane. It is an example. There are lots of protein that are activated with the protein kinase A enzyme. So now, in a nutshell, we can say when epinephrine or norepinephrine, when or in a word, when ligand bind with the domain of beta-1 adrenergic receptor, it ultimately gives some pathway, and in the last, it activates some protein, and protein are transmembrane. If they are transmembrane protein, carrier channel protein, they will be inserted into the cell, and it is so last effect of this beta-1 adrenergic receptor stimulation. So what will be the effect in our heart? Suppose it is SA node. It is our SA node pacemaker cell. So it is our beta-1 adrenergic receptor. If epinephrine act on this receptor, we know that numerous of protein, transmembrane protein, there's our protein channel will be come into our cell membrane. This may be sodium channel, this may be calcium channel, this may be potassium channel. Maximum sodium channel and calcium channel comes into the cell membrane, and they cause influx of sodium and calcium, influx of this ion influx. So these cells are accumulating the ions, and if we measure the resting membrane potential of this cell, so this is the threshold potential, and it is the resting membrane potential. If many ions are entering into the body due to the, into the cell due to the effect of beta-1 adrenergic receptor stimulation, their resting membrane potential will begin to rise steeply to the threshold potential. Normally, we know our SA node or AV node, normally they have a excitatory free potential. They spontaneously can go to the threshold, but if there's beta-1 adrenergic receptor are stimulated, this slope become very steep, and they very fastly reach to the threshold potential. They give an action potential, and then they come to the resting membrane potential, and again they steeply go to the threshold potential, give an action potential, and again come to the resting membrane potential, and again go to the threshold potential very steeply, give an action potential, and again reach to the resting membrane potential if beta-1 adrenergic receptor are stimulated here. And if it is not stimulated, then they reach to the threshold potential very slowly, give an action potential, and again reach to the resting membrane potential, again very slowly they reach to the threshold potential and give a action potential. So what we can see here, we can see this: if beta-1 adrenergic receptor are stimulated, they increase our heart rate. Heart rate are becoming faster and faster. This principle is also same for the AV node. Suppose normally AV node action potential is reaching to its threshold potential very slowly, then it gives a action potential, and it reaches to against its threshold potential very slowly. If beta-1 adrenergic receptor acts on the AV node, it will go to the saturation potential very steeply. Then it give action potential, come to the baseline, and again go to the saturation potential very steeply, give action potential, and again baseline steeply, action potential, baseline steeply, action potential, baseline steeply, action potential, baseline. And we can see that here it was giving a 2 beat, and here it is almost 5 beat. So we have seen the heart rate as SNO heart rate has increased. So let's draw it heart here. SNO heart rate is increased. Then AV node there excitability is also increased to accommodate with the increased heart rate in the SNO. So they can pass many action potential to contract the whole heart. Now we'll see what are the effects of on myocardium. So here is our myocardium. We can by this time we know when beta 1 adrenergic receptor are stimulated, numerous protein are insert numerous transmembrane protein channels are inserted into our cell membrane. So they are mainly calcium channel. So we can see when beta 1 adrenergic receptor are stimulated, numerous protein calcium channel are inserted in our cell membrane, and they cause influx of many calcium into the cell. So there will be numerous calcium. What happens if the myocardium is loaded with many calcium? There is a theorem called calcium triggered calcium release. Calcium triggered calcium release. Due to the action of beta 1 adrenergic receptor, many calcium will enter into our myocardium. This myocardium will act on the sarcoplasmic reticulum present in the myocardium. And we know that sarcoplasmic reticulum is loaded with calcium. This calcium cause efflux of this calcium into the cytoplasm. So there will be numerous calcium into the cytosol. Calcium, and calcium. When the calcium concentration in the cytosol increase, this calcium acts on troponin C. So let's draw here. It is a schematic diagram. It is our myosin chain. Myosin, it has action. Troponin. So sorry, this is myosin, and this is our actin. Actin and myosin interact with each other to cause muscle contraction, but there is a tropomyosin in between them. So let's suppose it is our tropomyosin. What is the function of this tropomyosin? The tropomyosin blocks the interaction point between the actin and myosin. Suppose here we draw. Suppose this is our myosin and this is our actin and this is our myosin here. This tropomyosin does is they blocks the point of interaction between actin and myosin is tropomyosin. And in tropomyosin there is a molecule called troponin. Troponin has 3 parts. Troponin T that interacts with the troponin that interacts with the tropomyosin. Troponin I means it is an inhibitory, and troponin C means troponin calcium. It binds with calcium. When the increased calcium bind with troponin C, calcium and troponin C binds, this then interacts with the tropomyosin and they remove the tropomyosin here. If calcium bind with the troponin C, then this will roll the tropomyosin inward. So what we'll see, the tropomyosin will be removed from this side, and this will be rolled here. This will be role share. So what we can see, actin and myosin interaction site open and they can interact with each other and they can cause muscle contraction. So ultimately, we can say if a beta blocker, if a beta 1 adrenergic receptor is stimulated, ultimately it leads to the increased concentration of calcium in myocardial cell that will interact with the tropomized troponin C, and it removes the blocking tropomyosin from actin and myosin, and as the blocking effect of troponin is removed, then tropomyosin can contract, and so we can say it improves the contractility. So in a nutshell, finally we can say what is the effect of beta 1 adrenergic receptor. It can increase the heart rate and it can increase the contractility. So beta 1, if we give a beta 1 blocker, these effects cannot help. So heart rate will fall and there will be reduced contractility of myocardium. And the second effect is that we know beta 1 adrenergic receptor was releasing renin, and ultimately into the RAS pathway, renin angiotensin aldosterone pathway. It activates the angiotensin 2 aldosterone, and this angiotensin 2 is a potent arterioconstrictor, potent vasoconstrictor. So if we give beta 1 adrenergic receptor blocker, there will be reduced level of angiotensin 2. So angiotensin mediated arterioconstriction or vasoconstriction cannot be healed. So there will be arteriodilation, and venodilation. So at last, if we summarize what we have learned up to this, what are the effects of beta blocker on our body? So previously we learned the effects of nitric oxide, and but now just effect of beta 1 blocker in heart. The heart effect in heart, they reduce our heart rate, and in heart they reduce contractility of our myocardium. And there are also effects. They have effects on our kidney. They reduce the renin-angiotensin solution pathway by acting on this pathway. They cause arteriodilation, and venodilation. And these effects are very, 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 very important on our angina. But now we will see how these are altering in our angina patient. How this reduce our angina. So we can now see the nitric oxide. It will cause arteriodilation, venodilation, and beta blocker. In heart, they reduce heart rate and contractility, and it is also act by kidney, causing arteriodilation and venodilation. Now we are going to deal a angina principle. What is angina? Angina means there is a blockage. Suppose that it is a artery of our heart. Angina means if there is a blocked by atherosclerosis or any plaque, then this dependent part of this heart cannot get enough oxygen to cope up with its demand. So this portion of the myocardium start to suffering and we feel pain, angina pain. So in our angina management, we are going to watch how we can change our body physiology to reduce this angina, and what are the effects of our nitric oxide or beta blocker to reduce this angina. So now we will start with the basic principle. angina means imbalance in our oxygen demand and oxygen supply. If we draw a diagram, then the oxygen demand and oxygen supply. Oxygen demand, it has very increased, and oxygen supply, it has reduced. Oxygen supply. Our principle of the therapy is we have to balance this. Now we don't want the system in this imbalanced situation. We want them in a balanced condition, like both are be balanced. Our oxygen demand and the oxygen supply to the heart. And if we transfer our heart from system 1 to system 2, then the angina will be automatically relieved. In this system, the patient is feeling angina. And in this system, there will be no angina. So there are two basic principles. Oxygen demand, where it is increased, what we can do, we can reduce our oxygen demand. We can reduce our oxygen demand, or we can increase our oxygen supply. There will be two. First, we can reduce, to make this system balanced. We can reduce our oxygen demand, or we can increase our oxygen supply. By this system, by doing this, reducing our oxygen demand or increasing our oxygen supply, we can transfer this imbalanced situation to this balanced situation. So we have two basic principles in our hand. So what are they? So we can increase our oxygen supply. So to increase our oxygen supply in heart, there can be two principles. One is arterial dilation of heart. Arterial dilation of cardiac vessel. And our second option is increasing diastolic time. Increasing diastole. So how diastolic time increasing can increase our oxygen supply? It is a very important concept, and we need to learn this. We know that heart has a peculiar blood supply, and it gets its blood during diastole. So when the heart gets squeezed, it supply blood to all over the body, but it don't supply any blood to its own. But when the heart gets dilated, it drags blood from various portions, and it also gives supply to its own. So if we cause our diastole to very slowly, then it will supply our heart. We can increase supply of oxygen supply to the heart. And how we can increase our diastole time? So if there is a concept that suppose our heart rate is a 75 in 60 seconds, then our cardiac cycle, it takes 0.8 seconds to cause the whole cardiac cycle. That means in 0.8 seconds, the heart causes both contraction and relaxation. This contraction and relaxation, it is also 0.8 seconds is also divided into 0.3 seconds and 0.5 seconds. As contraction is an active process, contraction occurs within 0.3 seconds, and relaxation of heart, it is a passive process, and it occurs within, it takes 0.5 second. So you can see the relaxing time is the greatest if our heart rate is 75 beats per minute. But if we pace our heart, if we cause our heart rate to increase. Suppose we have increased is from 75 to 100, 75 to 100, and if 100 beats per minute is occurring, that every cardiac cycle is taking 0.6 seconds. In 0.6 seconds, both contraction and relaxation are occurring together. But what we will see as contraction is an active process. Previously, it was 0.3 seconds, but in 100 beats per minute, this will not reduce significantly from 0.3 seconds. It may go to the 2.5 seconds, 2.5 seconds, and our relaxation time then it will be 3.5 seconds. So we can see that if our heart rate is increased, previously in 75 seconds, it was relaxation time was 0.5 seconds, and in 100 beats per minute, it has become 3.5 seconds. So contraction time it has reduced only 0.5 seconds, but our relaxation or diastole time it has significantly reduced up to 1.5 seconds. So we can see if we increase our heart rate, we significantly drop our diastolic time. And as we know, our heart is the only organ to receive its blood flow during diastole. And now we can see, we know that if we increase our heart rate, we decrease our diastolic time. So if we increase our heart rate, we decrease our diastolic time. Ultimately, if we increase our heart rate, we decrease our oxygen supply to the blood. So it is a principle: increased heart rate, decrease diastole time. Ultimately, it is decrease oxygen supply to heart. So how we can increase oxygen supply? By increasing the diastolic time. If we increase our diastolic time, the oxygen supply will be increased. And how we increase our diastolic time? By reducing the heart rate. If we reducing our heart rate significantly, then the main portion affected that it is diastolic time. If we increase our heart rate, the main portion affected is the diastolic time. If we decrease our heart rate, the main portion affected is our diastolic time. If we decrease our heart rate, then our diastolic time will be significantly increased. So if our significantly increased diastolic time, and if our diastolic time it is relaxing with a very long period, then we can say that our heart is receiving enough blood. So it is our principle. So we can cause the artery dilation, and we can cause increasing diastolic time by reducing our heart rate. And our second principle is to the reducing oxygen demand. How we can reduce our oxygen demand? One, we can reduce our preload. Second, we can reduce our afterload. Third, we can reduce our contractility. And fourth, we can reduce our heart rate. We can reduce, if we reduce our preload, our oxygen demand will be reduced. If we reduce our afterload, our oxygen demands will be reduced. If we reduce our contractility, our oxygen demands will be reduced. If we reduce our heart rate, our oxygen demand of heart will be reduced. So what will be the main management? We can see in an action to increase oxygen supply. We can increase blood supply to heart, and we can increase diastolic time. And the second step is we can reduce our oxygen demand. We can reduce our oxygen demand by reducing our preload reducing our afterload, reducing our contractility, and reducing our heart rate. And this slide is going to be the most important slide of our lecture. So we can make boxes. We have made a table to see the effect of glycerol trinitrate on oxygen, increasing oxygen supply, decreasing oxygen demand, effects of beta blocker alone, and then we have a third table that is showing our effects of both glycerol trinitrate and beta blocker to show the effects in increasing oxygen supply or decreasing oxygen demand. First of all, we can increase oxygen supply by doing coronary vasodilation, coronary dilation. So we have already know that our glycerol trinitrate or nitroglycerin, it is a autodilator and vasodilator. So what is do it increase? What is do this increase the blood supply as it is a artery dilator? And what is the effects on diastolic time of glycerol trinitrate? So it is as it is a vasodilator and venodilator. When these artery or veins are dilating, the heart is assuming the heart is getting less blood to the heart. And what it will do, it will increase its sympathetic nervous system reflexively. How it is done? It is done. Let's say when it is a vein, suppose it's a vein. Vein, and the vein ultimately is filling into our right heart. And from there, empty lung function, it is our aorta, it is our left heart, it is our aorta. When there is venodilation, there is more peripheral blood stasis on this venous system. So less blood is coming to the heart and less blood is coming through the aorta. And we know aorta, we have pressure baroreceptor which sends its impulse to the through glossopharyngeal nerve to our medulla. When due to venodilation, more blood is strained in the venous system, so less blood coming to the heart, less venous return, ultimately less ejection fraction, and in this nerve there will be less pressure, and it will send to the medulla, and medulla assume that our blood pressure has fallen, and it will significantly activate our sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system to the heart, and by activating our sympathetic nervous system, our heart rate is trying to increase so that blood pressure remains the same. So now we can say if we increase our, so if we give glycerol trinitrate, it will reflexively activate our heart by sympathetic nervous system, and if our heart is reflexively activated by sympathetic nervous system, our heart rate will be increased vigorously. Heart rate will be increased. And if heart rate, and we up to this we know that if heart rate is increased, diastolic time decrease. And it is not very good in this angina condition. So we give it in blue. It is not good, and it is mainly reflexively. We write here reflex. What is the effects on preload? Preload means amount of blood that is present during the contraction of heart. So we know that what is the preload here? What is the amount of blood that is present that the blood has to be ejected out? So you know, if our venodilation has occurred, there will be more peripheral stasis of blood, and less blood will come to the heart. And if there is less blood is coming to the heart, and if there is less blood is coming to the heart, so we can say preload is reduced. So our heart has to work on less blood. So so as we have to work on less blood, we need less energy. So our it is very beneficial for us. And it is decrease. It is decrease, and let's give it in green. So it is decrease and it is beneficial for this angina patient. What will be the afterload? Afterload is the pressure against which the heart has to pump its blood, and afterload is mainly detected by the arteriolar constriction. Suppose this is artery, this is arteriole. In arteriole, there is precapillary sphincter. Then it becomes a vein, and subsequently it drains into the venous system. So if this precapillary sphincter is tightened enough, then heart has to overcome this pressure that is exerting by this precapillary sphincter. So heart has to work on excess pressure. It is afterload. But we know as our nitroglycerin is an arteriodilator and vasodilator, it will relax this precapillary sphincter. And this, if this precapillary sphincter is relaxed, then heart can easily, it is relaxed enough, heart blood can easily pass through this sphincter, and we can say there is reduced afterload. And reducing afterload, it is very beneficial, because then now the heart need to work very low, and it reduces our oxygen demand. So reduced afterload, and it is very beneficial for us. And contractility. So what will be the contractility? We know that reflexly for using, because of using our nitroglyceride, reflexly our heart is getting sympathetic nervous system and activated the heart. So that sympathetic nervous system increased our heart rate, and heart rate has already been increased, or contractility is also increased, and it is not very good for this angina patient. Increased contractility, and it is mainly by reflex of sympathetic nervous system. And we also know that heart rate, previously their heart rate, it was we detected as diastolic time, that is decreased. It is not good for us. It reduces oxygen supply, and here heart rate, which is a parameter of our oxygen demand, it has also increased reflexly, and it is very not good for us. So now what we can say, that we are using nitroglycerin very frequently, but it has some harmful effects, such as it decreases our diastolic time, it increases our contractility reflexly, that increase our oxygen demand. It is not very good. It increase our heart rate, that is also increase our oxygen demand, and this is also not very good. Then what we give only beta blocker. Now we're going to see what we give only beta blocker to an angina patient. As we have already know that by reducing renin-angiotensin aldosterone system, our beta blocker can cause arterial dilation and venodilation. So as arterial dilation and venodilation is occurring, so we can theoretically say there will be mild coronary dilation, and it can increase mild oxygen supply to the blood, to the heart, and it is beneficial. So I have given it in green color. Or there can be no maximum. We can say that in coronary hearts are not dependent on sympathetic nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, so that can be no. In this case, we can give beta blocker if the angina is Prince metal angina, then it can cause small degree coronary dilation, but normally let's assume that there will be no effect. Let's change it, and let's assume there will be no effect on beta blocker. And heart rate, we already know that beta blocker significantly drop our heart rate. It decreases our heart rate, and it is beneficial, because if we decrease our heart rate, we increase our diastolic time. So if we increase our diastolic time, we increase our oxygen supply to heart, and it is beneficial for us. And it is what will be the effect on preload. Preload, we have said that preload, it is the blood that is present in our blood, and the blood that our heart has to ejected out. So if beta blocker, it was a arterial and venodilator also. So maybe more blood will be stayed in the arteries and vein, and less blood will come to the heart, and our heart has to let's see, it's preload. Preload means the blood that is present in our heart and the amount of blood that our heart has to eject it out as during as it, because of using of beta blocker, our heart rate has become significantly dropped, that all the blood that is present in our heart that cannot already eject it out. So some portion of its blood can always remain into the blood, and some added, so preload become increasing and increasing. So there will be mild increase in our preload that is not good for us. Mild increase in preload and afterload. Afterload means what is the precapillary sphincter tone, as our beta blocker is a precapillary sphincter dilator, artery dilator, so it will be decreased afterload. So it is beneficial for us. Contractility, we know that our beta blocker reduce the heart contractility, and we can also know that beta blockers it reduce our heart rate. As it reduce our heart rate, it is beneficial for us. So we can see that beta blocker alone effects on angina, not significant effects on cardiodilation, but as they reduce our heart rate, here we can say they reduce our heart rate and increase our diastolic time. Ultimately, they increase oxygen supply to the blood, and it significantly, mildly, they increase our preload, that is not beneficial. So I have given it in red color, and they cause arterial dilation, and by this they reduce afterload, they can cause contraction, or they can reduce contractility, they can reduce happens, and all are beneficial for us. So what will be the effect if we use them both together? So blood supply, it has increased mainly due to glycerol trinitrate if we use them together. In glycerol trinitrate, our heart rate was increased reflexly, that reduce our diastolic time and reduce our oxygen supply to the blood. But beta blocker, our heart rate was reduced, so it was beneficial because it will increase our heart diastolic time, and ultimately it increased our blood supply. So we can say nitroglycerin decreased our oxygen supply, beta blocker increased our oxygen supply. So there will be no net change. So it was beneficial because only using glycerol trinitrate, we decreased our oxygen supply, but here it is no net change. So preload, there will be no net change on preload. Afterload, it is significantly decreased, so it is beneficial for us. On contractility, there will be no significant change, or mildly it is decreased. So it is beneficial for us that contractility is not changed or mildly decreased, so it is demanding less oxygen. So and in heart rate, there will be no significant change, or it will be mildly decreased, and it is also beneficial for us as the oxygen demand of heart rate is decreased, our oxygen demand has also decreased, so it is beneficial for this angina patient. So this was our topics on angina and the use of glycerol trinitrate and beta blocker together. Hope you understand well. Thanks for watching.